What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the NBA lineup generator video for Monday, November 13th. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. We have a four-game NBA slate to look at tonight. This is take two. A few people probably already saw it, but I posted this entire video just to find out that I had recorded it all with no sound. So we are running it back, doing it again. And as always, we're going to walk through DraftKings and FanDuel and take a look at tonight's slate using the lineup generator. I will show you features of the tool if you're interested in using it for yourself, which you should be. More on that later. And then we can also just look at different player exposures that we're getting to, why we would be getting to those players, and talk about the slate a little bit. But first, make sure that you hit the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and hit the notification bell so that you know when our shows go live. And also, if you're watching this on Twitter, help me out and hit the thumbs up button on there as well. Now, or like button rather. Now, starting on DraftKings, we are going to go to the DraftKings main slate. We have our options here for whatever kinds of lineups we want to get. If you are completely unfamiliar with this tool, it's your first time watching, this is essentially a tool that uses our projections, our player projections, our ownership projections, and our models on the back end, and then gives you the outputs in the form of individual lineups that you can take or leave, kind of like a dating app. And so the first thing that you need to do is decide what kind of lineups that you want. If you go to all lineups, you will get versions of all of these types of lineups. If you're playing smaller field stuff and you're not as concerned about ownership, going to chalky lineups makes some sense. Balanced lineups can make sense in any format. And then you can go to contrarian lineups if you're playing, your very large field tournaments, very top heavy tournaments. Or again, you can just go to all lineups and then manually choose the ones that you want. For the sake of this video, I want to look at some contrarian lineups, so I'll do that. And then here you have the option to lock in a player. This isn't part of my process. It's not something that I do. But if you're somebody that maybe you're playing a single entry contest, you want Malik Monk in your lineup, save yourself some time, click Malik Monk, and then every lineup that you get will have Malik Monk in it. So now we're going to get to the lineups. And like I said, you have the save option, the discard option. It's as simple as that. You can choose to save it or get rid of it. Here at the top, it tells you how much salary you used, the projected fantasy points, and the ownership. And then down here on a sliding scale, you can see where it ranks in terms of projection and where it ranks in terms of ownership. Since these numbers on the surface don't really tell you much, it's all about how they compare to other lineups. And then you can get the individual players in the lineup, their projection, their ownership. So for this video, I'm going to just save the first 20 lineups that I get. But first, I need to clear out the ones from the previous video. And then we can go get more lineups. So I'm going to save the first 20 that we get, and then we can take a look at the player exposures and how these lineups look individually. I like looking at the contrarian lineups because there's always a tendency for people, I think, to play maybe a little bit too contrarian. I want to be contrarian in this tournament, and then suddenly they have nothing but 3% owned players throughout their lineup. You can see using this tool sort of how to balance a lineup better than that. Now, as far as the individual player exposures go, we have Ayo Dosunmu at the top. There is not a lot of value on this slate, but we don't have Alex Caruso tonight for the Bulls. Dosunmu played about 26 and a half minutes, including closing the game yesterday. He's only 3,400. He's the highest owned player on the slate at 48%. We're getting to about 70 in the 20 lineups that I selected. Jakob Poeltl, 45% in a great matchup with the Wizards, over the field on him. Keon Ellis at 3,900, not a particularly confidence-inspiring option, for lack of a better phrase. But again, we don't have a lot of good value, and he's not getting much ownership, which is the really appealing part, I think. There's a lot of volatility here. He could play anywhere from like 22 to 30 minutes, but he's only projected for 12% ownership. So we're taking our chances on him on a slate that doesn't have much value. We do need to keep an eye on De'Aaron Fox's status, though. Fox is currently listed as doubtful, but he did go through a full shoot around today. So there is some chance that he just gets upgraded and ends up playing tonight, in which case Keon Ellis looks horrible. But for now, assuming Fox is out, we are getting to him. Bobby Portis, 5,400. He's a really interesting tournament option tonight. You don't have Jay Crowder, so there is the potential for him to get a few more minutes at the 4 alongside Brook Lopez. He's a good point per minute guy. And even if he does just play his normal, 22 minutes or so, he can still get it done at 5,400 potentially. Darius Garland, OG Anunoby, both in good matchups. Garland against the Kings, Anunoby against the Wizards. Monk is another one where you're not really looking to pay $6K for him if De'Aaron Fox ends up playing. But for now, assuming he's out, we have seen a big uptick in production, about 1.2 DraftKings points per minute in about 25 or 26 minutes per game for Malik Monk without Fox. Scotty Barnes doing it all for the Raptors this year, gets that great matchup with Washington. Giannis is tough to get to because we don't have a lot of value tonight, but he is the highest projected player on the slate. He's projected for 10% ownership. He can certainly break a slate just like Nikola Jokic broke last night's. And it be a situation where you just need the cheap plays anyway because Giannis scored so many points. So at low ownership, he does make some sense. We have Mobley, Vooch, and DeRozan rounding out our top exposures here. Now, looking at this number one lineup, the first one I saved, 243 DraftKings points, 147% aggregate ownership. If you just kind of scroll through these other lineups, the projection is in line with most of the other lineups. The ownership also in line with most of the other lineups, but probably a little bit lower. So an interesting contrarian lineup to look at. Dennis Schroeder, OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes, all taking on the Wizards. Great matchup for them. Jakob Poeltl as well. So we have 4 Raptors here, but not really concerned about that. It's only a 4-game slate, and the Wizards play at the fastest pace in the league while allowing the second most points per 100 possessions. These guys are all reasonably priced. Happy to get to them, whether it's 3 or 4 together. Keegan Murray, 20% owned, going up against Cleveland. I don't love Keegan Murray tonight, but he kind of just fits into this lineup at that price point. Keon Ellis, already mentioned him, 13% owned, probably playing anywhere from 22 to 30 minutes if Fox is out. Not a great point per minute guy, but we just are very limited in terms of value. Bilal Coulibaly getting 14% ownership right now. He should play plenty of minutes tonight. Danilo Gallinari is resting for the Wizards. One key piece of information to pay attention to, though, Daniel Gafford is questionable. If Gafford's out, it helps solidify Coulibaly's playing time as well. We've seen Coulibaly get a start with Gafford out, and then last night, Gafford was injured during the game, and Coulibaly started the second half, picked up a lot of minutes without Gafford. So he looks fine as a value, even if Gafford is in, but he'll look even better if Gafford is out. And then finally, we're rounding out the lineup with a 25% owned Vooch at 7,600. Really like getting to him tonight against the Bucks. So as you can see, this is one of the more contrarian lineups that we built, but we still have every player in double-digit ownership. Part of that's because it's a 4-game slate. But the thing you have to keep in mind, too, is that it matters what players you don't have. And when you look at this particular lineup, we don't have Ayo Dosunmu. He's the highest projected owned guy on the slate at 48%. We don't have Kobe White. We don't have Malik Monk. We don't have Jared Allen. We don't have DeMar DeRozan. Nikola Vucevic is the highest owned player in this lineup at 24.8%. He's projected to be the 10th highest owned player on this slate. So that's something that I think goes overlooked when people talk about contrarian lineups. If you just looked at this lineup quickly, you might say, oh, it's chalky. It's, everybody's 15, 20% owned. But if you're not playing the 9 most popular players on the slate, your lineup's different. So I think that is one thing that goes overlooked. And that's why I like looking at tools like this, because it helps to point that out. Now we're going to switch over and take a look at FanDuel as well. But before we get into FanDuel, you can sign up, use this tool for yourself. It is the most cost-efficient way to get access to our product, to our player projections, ownership projections, our models, because like I said, all of that stuff is being utilized on the back end of this tool, and then you're getting the final result. So you're not responsible for all of the inputs where you can screw things up, but you are getting the final result. You do still have some customization options, whether it's locking a player in or, and I'll show this when we go through FanDuel, you can still change players within those given lineups as well. $14.95 for a week gets you, or per week rather, gets you access to this tool. And like I said, it's perfect if you're playing single entry, 3 max, 20 max. Perfect for players that, maybe have a lower bankroll or just don't play as much volume. Our full Sims package is $199 a month. It is great. I recommend it. It's what you should be aspiring to use, but it doesn't make sense for everybody. If you're playing $80 a night, you're playing the $4 20 max tournament on DraftKings, there's no reason you should be paying $200 a month for any product, no matter how good it is, because it's going to be so difficult for you to profit. But this is perfect if that is the type of contest that you play. $14.95 per week gets you access. And it's very important because, you can watch this video. I like to think this video is valuable, but everything's going to change when we get more injury news, and you're not going to be wanting to play the guys that looked good at 3:30 p.m. You want to be using the tool as close to lock as you can to get, the biggest advantage out of it. Now, looking at FanDuel, we're going to go to contrarian lineups. And if you are looking to use this tool, by the way, the link is below on YouTube, and I will also tweet it out. So looking at FanDuel now, we're going to do the same thing. Delete the lineups from the previous video that I forgot to delete, and then go get 20 new lineups and look at our exposures there. They should be somewhat different from DraftKings since pricing is different, roster construction is different. There is generally softer pricing and more value on FanDuel as well. So here on FanDuel right now, we're getting Keon Ellis and Ayo Dosunmu, both 60%. They're both essentially minimum salary. Keon Ellis coming in at $3,500, which is the minimum. Ayo Dosunmu $100 more. So they both are even better values on FanDuel than they are on DraftKings, especially Ellis, who's $400 less than he was on DraftKings. Jakob Poeltl showing up third most for us at 55%. Then we're getting the Monk and Murray. Again, they're not going to look as good if De'Aaron Fox is in, particularly Monk. We're getting the 40% Kyle Kuzma at 7,800. He's one of the more popular guys on FanDuel tonight. Scotty Barnes. Karis LeVert is an interesting one. $6,300 price tag. He is not particularly popular. He's only pulling on FanDuel about 16% ownership. We're getting to 35. So pretty much 2x the field there. Getting to Giannis, he's a little bit easier to get to than he is on DraftKings. So he's 16% owned instead of 10, but we're still over the field on him. Julius Randle, Dennis Schroeder, Denny Avdia, all rounding out our top player exposures. And then if we find an interesting lineup to look at, so here we have 286 fantasy points, 288, 220 to 230% aggregate ownership. This lineup's a lot lower owned, also gives up about 7 or 8 fantasy points. So we can take a look at this one, 279.8 fantasy points, 188% aggregate ownership. Drew Holiday and Dennis Schroeder at the point guard spots. Jordan Poole and Ayo Dosunmu at shooting guard. Poole is a player who is more favorably priced on FanDuel than DraftKings as well. Jaylen Brown and Karis LeVert at the small forward positions. Kuzma, Randall, and then closing it out with a 6% owned Brook Lopez. So just like we saw on DraftKings, this lineup, if you're just looking at the ownership numbers, isn't that contrarian. Everybody except Brook Lopez is projected for at least 18% ownership or 16% ownership. Jaylen Brown 10%. And Lopez, the two below 16%. But, it still looks kind of chalky, but you start looking at who's not in this lineup. Pascal Siakam is the most popular player on FanDuel right now at 47%. Malik Monk is second. Denny Avdia is third. None of those players are in this lineup. Kevin Huerter, also not in this lineup. Kuzma is the fifth most popular player. He's in the lineup. There's no Torrey Craig. We do have Ayo Dosunmu. We do have Drew Holiday. So we're not avoiding like the entire top 9 like we did on DraftKings, but we do have a couple of just low owned players like Lopez and Brown that we didn't have in the DraftKings version. But again, it's important to pay attention to who's not in the lineup as well. So that's our look through the lineup generator for DraftKings and FanDuel. Again, I highly, highly recommend signing up and using this tool. If you haven't used any of our tools or you haven't signed up for anything before, this is where I would start. It's the best use of your money. It's the best bang for your buck. You're able to leverage all of our tools that are available in more expensive packages where you can utilize the full tool. You're still able to utilize them in this product for $14.95 per week. So I highly recommend doing that. It will make your lineups better. But that's all we have for you today. Thank you for checking out the video. Hopefully you found it useful, and I'll see you back here again tomorrow.